So, Monica, thank you so much for joining us on Fran and Friends. This is our second podcast.
Really glad to be here. Woo-hoo.
So, I was so inspired by your story, how you listened to yourself, engaging your career, that I had to have you come on here and share because I find that people aren't really authentic to themselves. And so, when we do trust ourselves enough to be authentic, we can make better choices for ourselves. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask some fun topics.
Okay, here we go.
All right. All right. The first one is, what's one of your best dad jokes or mom jokes or jokes in general?
Well, oh my God, you're really putting me on the spot. So I love the orange. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Who's there? Orange.
Aren't you?
Aren't you glad to see me? Sorry. It's like,
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a courtesy laugh.
so it's funny. So like my dad passed away like 19 years ago. So I have no fresh dad jokes. Like it's not like consistently in my space where my dad is being corny, you know?
Okay.
So yeah, that's why I was like, wait a second, is there anything I could remember? But here's a funny, and it may not be funny, I don't know. So my dad he's an immigrant, so he hasn't had an accent. And so he would call me and he goes, hi, it's dead, not dad, dead. And I'm like, okay, but you're still alive. But you know, he's alive here, but some people might not find that funny. I think it's hilarious.
No, it's funny because I texted one of my cousins today and she said, hey, cousin, I'm at work. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then she sent me like a joke or something. And then I was like, oh, I'm crying. She goes, wait, I'm going to call you right back. I'm going to take a break and go to the bathroom. And I'm like, cause that's a figurative crying. It means like it's a slang. It means that I'm laughing. She goes, oh my God, because I thought, something was going on. That's why you text me. And I'm like, no. She was like, well, I said, it's like the slang that you use when people say, I'm dead. Well, she goes, right now, I'm dead. Ha ha ha.
Okay, so I guess that was a good one to share. Okay.
Yeah, that was good.
I don't know. I still think about it. I talk about it. I think it's hilarious because it just reminds me of him and how he was, so.
Beautiful. Because our parents, I think they leave an imprint on us, right? In some way, shape, or form, whether through influence or whatever. I think we learn from observation.
We learn from observation. Yeah. And it's not necessarily learning like what they do, we do. That's not always the case. I remember seeing a lot of things that I did not agree with. And so I mental note, I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that. I'm not acting like that. So,
oh my goodness, I would love to jump into that conversation but I know that's going to get us in a whole ball game. But thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you making the time to share with the collective community some tips, some experiences that have totally changed your life. So if you could share a little bit, like maybe about 5 minutes, how you went from an aerospace engineer to a health and lifestyle engineer. I'm like, whoa.
That's a leap. It's not such a leap when you hear my story. Thanks so much for having me here, Fran. I laugh a lot when I'm nervous. So there. So I grew up in a spiritual home. I believe my dad had some midlife crisis, and he had come across some new friends that he had met, and they were intuitives, they were healers and meditators, and he brought that home to my sister and I. And so I remember him bringing this box of cassette tapes, and on the cover it said meditation for children. And I remember we sat down on the couch and he put on this cassette tape and we listened. And still to this day, like I remember the visual of this guy taking us on this meditation. So when I go to therapy or if I'm going on a retreat and they ask us to remember or go into a place, this is the place I go to when I was 8 years old. And it was this walking along this path and this meadow, and there's a stream and there's deer and butterfly and birds and trees. And, so I still go there. So this is what I grew up with. So meditation, self-healing. My dad taught us to self-heal. I didn't know it at the time, but it was Reiki. And he taught us how to do these things. So things would happen. Like I remember once I dove into the shallow part of the pool. I don't know why. Dumb kid. And I hit my head and I came home and I said, ow, ow. And he's like, well, he took a knife. This is weird. He took a knife, and because I think it was cold, he laid it on top flat to kind of do this. And then he said to me, and he would do the same thing. He's like, just put your hand on your head and just visualize it gone. Our hands are healers. All of our hands.
I was going to ask you, for those that are watching, could you explain to them what Reiki is?
Oh, Reiki is energy healing. Yeah. So Reiki is energy healing. I studied it a long time ago. I'm not a master of Reiki, so I don't necessarily practice right now. I do different energy healing, but it is an energy healing, and it's hands that are placed in certain ways above the body, not on the body. They're not touching you. And it just kind of goes alongside, like from head to toe, while you're laying down. And there's different modalities. So I studied Usui, but it was many years ago. So it's not fresh for me right now.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah. Anyway, so I had all that, and then go ahead.
No, I said you're saying the knife on the head thing. He said to pretend that it's
not
there.
I don't know if it did anything. I think because it was cold, and in metal, like maybe that was something that I just didn't know that it was healing. I was a child. It was like 40 years ago or something. So I just remember things like that, but also my hands. So things that I had in my back pocket to practice if I wanted to. I also started to, which I didn't learn from anybody, but when I was a child, I started to notice differences between the way I was living and between the way my friends were living. And every night I would say a prayer. And after my prayer, I would start saying like these affirmations or other additional prayers, and like what I wanted to see in my life. And one of the things that I kept praying for was abundance. And I just said, hey, because I saw how we were, like that, we were poor, and I wanted more when I grew up. And I wanted to have enough to live on and extra to share. And so every single night, this is what I prayed for. And it was one of the things. It's the one thing that I really remember. And so, I mean, I'm there, I've manifested it. So I'm really grateful for that. But no one ever taught me that. It was just something I just started noticing, and I just started praying for it and creating affirmations and seeing what could be. And, we took a detour for a few years in Brazil. We lived there for a few years. And all my cousins they're older than me, PhDs, engineers, psychologists, veterinarians, and living there and going to high school there with all my peers. They wanted to be so many wonderful things, lawyers, speech pathologists, and engineers. And when I was here in the United States studying, everyone either wanted to get married or they wanted to be an accountant. And so that was kind of like my path. I didn't know anymore. My parents were not college graduates. So in Brazil, I think that really helped to open up my world. And so I became an engineer. And while I was in engineering, I worked at Boeing, and Boeing pays for outside classes. So I would always take these extra classes. And even on my own, I would take all these spiritual classes just because I wanted to balance whatever I was doing at work. I needed to balance the stress. So I studied all these other things, all these different modalities, just being curious about it all. And I don't know, wanting a different experience. And I think that's kind of what led me to where I am today. It's become full circle. So I left engineering and the stress behind when I moved to the Bay Area, and I just started getting back to the spirituality of it. So yeah,
Which has led you to your practice right now.
which has led me to my practice right now. Yeah. So I had a retreat a couple months ago, and one gal who came, her feedback was, "Oh, I was really expecting woo, but this was more practical." And the reality is, yes, there's the woo part of me, but then there's also the practical, strategic, analytical, logical engineer. I'm still her, right? I wear a lot of different hats. So bringing in the spiritual with the practical, blending in the Eastern and Western has been brilliant for me, because that's what I've been doing all my life. Like, I do it for myself when I go to the doctor, right? Acupuncture, right? Regular doctor, Western doctor, acupuncturist, right? Chiropractor, energy healers. I do it for my dogs. Regular
Do
vet
you
acupuncture.
Could you explain what woo is for the viewers?
Oh, just more spiritual, a little bit weird. Like one of the classes that I took was
Woo is
ooh,
like
woo. Well, it's right. So it's what's interesting is, like, it wasn't normal, right? It was a
okay,
little woo woo, and now it's not so much. Now it's become a little bit more mainstream, where people are looking for energy healers and health coaches that do something a little bit different, right? Because maybe traditionally, whatever we were doing does not work, but at the same time, we're all unique individuals. And
hmm,
so different things will work for us. Something will work for me that will not work for you, Fran. And
right,
that's okay, right? That's okay. It's
yeah,
different energy. And the healer or doctor that we're working with, they're going to have different energy than us. And so we could have the same doctor, but like their energy with mine combined with mine will be different than the energy you have with them. So,
right.
like, for
Because we're all
instance,
at different stages, right?
yeah. So like I had this experience where I was going for acupuncture, and it was a brilliant experience. I really felt a difference. And the woman went out on maternity leave, and so they sent in a sub for her, a temporary sub. Well, I went for an appointment with this new acupuncturist, and already I could feel a difference. Like, whatever it was not working. Well, a lot of it is the intention of the healer. If the doctor is coming in and it's like, okay, let's hurry up, let's get on with this, or you're just temporary, or I'm just temporary, it's going to be a very different feel than, oh, it's nice to see you again. I'm glad that you're here. How can I help you? I had a doctor. I'm so upset still. I switched doctors, I fired them. But I was talking to the doctor, and I had a list of questions for her. And apparently 15 minutes was up, and she's opened the door, and she's standing in front of the door. And I said, I'm not done. I still have questions for you.
Oh,
And she's already out the door. So I'm like, okay, she's fired. So, I think it's really important to advocate for
so
ourselves,
hmm,
because no one else is.
yeah, and this is what drew me to you, because for my story, I was suppressed when I was younger, so having to advocate for myself is something that I had to really and still am practicing, which I find myself fumbling a lot, but the point is I'm more aware now. So when with you on your journey, because you mentioned that you had moved from so many departments while working at the facility, the manufacturing
Yeah.
company that you
Yeah.
did, like, how did you know? How did you navigate those spaces to say, like, hey, I know this is for me or this isn't for me? Like, could you give a couple of tips on something practical that they can like identify with, even though it is I feel like the intuition is more of like a feeling that has to be sensed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. And the example I gave to you when we originally talked, I mean, that was a very strong intuitive sense for sure. But how did I know, like, from previous, and I'll get to that, but when I was in my very first job at Boeing, like, I really enjoyed it. I really did. But it was my first job out of college. And being an engineer for aircraft is pretty scary when they say, okay, here's some training. You're on your own. Your signature is gold, and And then you see things on the news where the airplane's flying and then the plug pops out, right? Like,
I don't
it's
want
just
to be
kind of
on that
scary.
airplane.
Don't want to be on that airplane, don't want to be the engineer who signed off on it or QA,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, so I'm in this really stressful position of where I'm telling the mechanics how to fix the airplane. And my signature is gold. Anyway, I was in this space for almost 2 years. And then I had this, it's kind of serendipitous in a way. I was kind of thinking about moving to a different position because this was my first position out of college. I wanted to do some kind of rotation and see the different departments at Boeing. Well, my manager went on leave. We had this other manager come in temporarily. He was in the stress department. And so he was really nice. And I was talking to him and I said, hey, I'm thinking about going to a different um, position. Can you help me get to, maybe a stress position, analyst position? And he said, sure. So he helped me with that. He found out what was perhaps a good starting point. And I ended up in this position for analyzing structures, secondary structures, which are leads and galleys on the aircraft. Unfortunately, this was the most boring job in the whole entire world. It was basically paper pushing. There was no engineering involved. It was like basically, here's some numbers, divide by 9 or divide by 1.6, and does it match? Is it greater than or more, you know what I mean, equal to or greater than this number that we need? And these projects took a year. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so boring. And there was like no growth within that space. So I'm in this space and I'm going to work and I'm like crying because I'm so bored. And I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? I went back to the factory one day and I was talking to my previous, I used to like be friendly with like mechanics and QA. So they all liked
Mhm.
working with me because I never pointed fingers at them and said, oh, it's your fault. I wasn't that kind of engineer. Anyway, so I was talking to one of the QA supervisors, and he said to me, what you can do is go to graduate school. Boeing pays for you to get your MBA. He goes, a lot of the engineers are doing that. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So that's what I did. I took an educational leave of absence and I went back to school and got my graduate degree. So I feel like, when I look back, my life has been in flow. And I know it's because of when I was a child and I saw these differences, I started asking for things. And because I was
Mm.
asking for things were being put in my path that allowed me to flow. So even though there were like ebbs and flows and sadness and crying and and stuff, like things still kind of came into my path at certain times where and when I needed it. And it allowed me to move forward.
So you mentioned flow, like you also mentioned that your family grew up in a lot of poverty. And with asking for things, and you mentioned earlier, and I'd like for you to repeat that again if you can, what that asking looked like in contrast to what you had when you were younger, to when now that you've been asking for these things, like, hey, this is what life looks like now, and this is what it was before.
Yeah. So the financial aspect, that's basically how I asked for it, just enough to live on. Like I wanted to feel comfortable. And
Mm-hmm.
what I was really looking at was in my mind was I saw how I was living, 2 bedroom, 1 bath apartment for the 4 of us. And in particular, a house of one of my sister's friends that I really liked. It was really nice. In retrospect, I could Google it today. It probably wasn't that big, but it's very big. It's like a mansion when you're coming from this teeny tiny apartment. And then, they had 5 kids and, so like it was big. So I'd always look at that because it always felt light and airy and
Mm-hmm.
full of delicious chaos, right? With friends and family, right? So
Yeah.
when I asked her these things, I was thinking about that. Dad was a doctor, mom was a housewife. So plenty, I believe, and the story I was telling myself, plenty of abundance there. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was almost picturing something like that. But just something where I already knew because my parents, even though we were poor, they
Mm-hmm.
still gave back. They still gave back. Like I remember, well, this I don't remember actually. I was told this as an adult. But we had this neighbor across the street, and she had 3 kids, and she had a husband. But anyway, I don't want to get into it. But this woman told me, she's recently passed, but she told me this story, maybe within the past 10 years, that at one point she was telling my parents that she did not have like any food to feed her kids. She had 3 kids, no food
Okay.
to feed her children, didn't know where the money was coming from. My parents, still same 2 bedroom, 1 bath, and she's got 3 kids. My parents went out and came home with a trunk full of groceries for her. And I'm
Wow.
like, oh my God. Like I knew we didn't have it. Like I knew,
Yeah.
I heard my dad telling the landlord, sorry, we can't make rent this month. I knew that when
Mm,
my parents could help that they did, but not for, day to day, but they were able to help her. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so wonderful. That's a great story for me to remember, my
that's
parents by.
cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I
So,
I can resonate with that because we've had that experience in my family, not having the rent and not having money to even put food on the table. So neighbors like you definitely were helpful at those times. So I was grateful for that. It's
yeah.
interesting that as a kid, you even knew that affirmation to say, and also that you identified that feeling. That was so cool because it's like, wow, I know as kids we have these imaginations, and when we grow up, because of the stuff that we experience, it causes us to not see life in a more juicier term, as you mentioned. And
Yeah.
so I really enjoyed that. I probably have to do that affirmation too.
No, I think it's brilliant. And I don't know if I told you this, friend, but I recently studied with Mike Dooley, and it was this course in manifesting. And I was just called to do it. And I don't know why, but I did it. And I'm like, oh my God, like everything that he taught us was exactly what I had done as a child, but he put
Hmm.
it on paper. He created the exercises for it, and
So
I'm
he
like,
made
God, this is
structure
so
for it
brilliant.
so people can follow that formula.
Yes, exactly,
Um,
exactly. So I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. Like, I'm glad I signed up, even though like I know it, but
mhm.
it's a good reminder and it's good validation. It
Mm.
reminded me of my childhood and all the things that I put out there so that I could help myself, not knowing, of course, that it was going to help me because I was still a child and I wasn't seeing the abundance as a child.
Yeah, when I left you that day talking to you, I said I started to picture myself as far as like what that juiciness felt like to be like in abundance, to have the billionaire status. I see the pictures, but I'm trying to do it on a level, not trying. I am exercising it on a level where I'm not at that millionaire or billionaire status. So having to have that picture be prevalent and that feeling is definitely something I feel that is for people that do come from that kind of background. It, I think that's a struggle to even have that kind of a picture. So,
It can be. It can be. I
or
was really
it can be.
fortunate.
I can be. Yeah.
Yes, it can be. I was really fortunate that I was surrounded by people that already had more. So I
Mm,
could visualize it. I can't imagine having been in that position and still I don't know if this would have happened if I hadn't been around people who had more, even if it was only a little bit more.
right.
Because if my parents had sent me to public school down the street, I would have been in the same shit than all of them because they're all coming from the same homes, right?
Yeah.
This is basically the
Yeah.
ghetto of Chicago. So I don't know what I would have seen that would have helped me to say, I can do better. I want to do better.
Right.
My cousin tells me, he goes, you and your sister have succeeded so much because your parents were poor, but I'm not entirely sure that that would have been the case if we weren't surrounded by people who appeared to be affluent.
Mm. So when I think like for whatever reason, the universe has its own plans, right? We have these contrasts. So when we do have the keys to what this other person needs, it's like, hey, this is why this happened. So it connects for us in that way. I kind of find that collectively, we're like puzzle pieces. Like as we go on our journey, somebody gives us this connection, and then somebody gives us this connection. And then we're like, oh, okay, good. Now I found another piece. And we keep building upon that, which is why I really loved your story.
Yes, I believe that we are all pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah.
We absolutely are. And I think just going back to what you said before, um, I feel like we'll be able to attract abundance not only by saying and visualizing what we want and feeling into what we want,
Mm-hmm.
it's being aware of really what's going on, not just going blindly and saying, oh, I want to be rich or I want to be a billionaire or
Mm-hmm.
start, it's about looking at the opportunities in front of you, being fully aware of the present moment to make these decisions. And sometimes we're not. We're all in reaction mode, right? So like we don't really see what's going on. We're not in the present moment. And if we're not, then we can't see what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I think you said something to me last week too, something along the lines of being open to how the universe brings you your answer, whatever that might look like. And from you, when you shared with me last week, I'm like, oh my God, I needed you for this answer. You remember that? I was
I
like,
do.
oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it. So back to you.
This is about you too,
It's about us.
It's
Yes.
about us.
So, could you also share other parts in your life where you've seen how listening to your intuition has been beneficial and what that looked like?
Yeah. Yeah. So did you want me to share the story about that last job I
Sure,
had?
girl,
Yeah.
share it.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So only because I feel like it wasn't super beneficial. That's why I wanted to go back and say that. So it was beneficial because I recognized it right. So when we're open, okay, and it's not just the QA supervisor suggesting I go to get my graduate degree. This was
Hmm.
literally, so I had this opportunity to apply for a job. I loved the position I was in. I was in it for 4 years. It was awesome. People loved me. I loved them. It was a great opportunity. It was a great job. But for me, I didn't see any growth in there because I didn't want to grow. That was me. I didn't want to grow. I
You
wanted to
didn't want
stay.
to grow?
I did not. No, the next step for me in that position was to be an FAA authorized representative. And I
Okay.
was already stressed out doing what I was doing, even though I loved it. But because I was so stressed out, I was getting sick a lot. I would come home from work
Mhm.
not wanting to do anything. I needed days off, because I was so like it was just overtaking me. And I didn't necessarily have the right tools at the time to take care of myself. Now I do. But at the
Mm.
time, I didn't. I did the best I could. And I didn't want to take that next step of becoming an authorized representative. So I was just going to stay where I was. And I had a coworker in another group say, hey, this position opened up in customer engineering. It is so you. And I looked at it and I said, you're right. It is so me, but I like this job. And he goes, come on, come on. I'm going to apply for it. So and so is going to apply for it. Let's do it. And I'm competitive. So I did. And I got the
And you got it.
interview. Anyway, I got the interview. And as I was leaving the interview, I asked them, I said, so when am I going to find out? And they're like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, don't worry about it. I walked out the door. I'm like, I like my job. This was a good experience for me to update my resume and practice interviewing. So
Mhm.
I left. Next morning, I get into work and there's the phone's ringing. I pick it up. Hello. Um, we want to offer you the job. You need to tell your manager, or we're going to tell him by tomorrow, end of day. I'm like, ah. So I had to decide what I wanted to do. This was a dream job. Dream job. I had applied for it years before. I didn't get called for an interview, but this time I did. And now I had the job and I'm like so excited. I know exactly which airline I want to work for. They ask you for the top 3 airlines. I gave it to them. I was so excited. But to make sure I did a little bit of research. I talked to some of the customer engineers. I walked
Mhm.
around the building. I wanted to get a sense of it. I wanted to feel it. Can I come here every day? Can I work in this environment? What does it feel like in here? So I did my due diligence. And then so I ended up taking the job, and turns out it wasn't in that building. And
It wasn't your dream job?
it wasn't my dream job. It wasn't in the commercial airlines. They put me on the defense side. So when the
Hmm.
new manager called me up, he's like, "Hey, I want you to come here, come meet your new coworkers and see where you're going to be sitting." And I said, "Okay, I'll be there in 10 minutes." And he said, "10 minutes?" And I go, "Yeah, yeah. Aren't you in this building?" And he says, "No, no, we're in the other building." And I'm like, "Oh, crap." So I get in the car, I drive over, and my whole body is like, wrong, wrong, wrong. This is so wrong. But I'm going. I'm like, no, no, maybe my body is wrong. And I'm going.
Hmm.
I come into the building, wrong. I go into the elevator, press the button. I'm like, oh my God, this is so wrong. This is not right. This is
You're just
completely
getting these overwhelming feelings of being wrong, like,
so
"Oh, it's
yes,
wrong."
this is the strongest feeling of wrong I ever had in my life,
Wow,
still even to this day.
wow.
So I go up there, I see where I'm sitting, I meet the people, and I'm like, oh, shit. I go back to my office and I tell my manager, "Hey, I don't think this is the right job for me. It doesn't feel good at all. Can I stay here?" And he said, "Sorry, requisition is closed." And I'm like, "Oh crap." He goes, "You're going to do great." And I'm like, "Oh my God." Anyway,
Requisition happens that fast?
yes, yes, because they weren't going to replace me. They're like, "Okay, we have enough for now." So once I accepted the other job, they said, "Okay, this is
They
closed."
closed off that position.
They closed off this position.
Oh, wow.
They didn't hire anybody after me. So I'm like, "Oh my God." He's like, "You'll be great. Don't worry about it. This is so awesome." And I'm like, okay. So I transfer over, and every day I'm like, oh shit, oh shit. And then it's just an oh shit every single day because
Mm.
no one's giving me work. I keep asking, no one's giving me work. They don't assign me a mentor. What do I do? I'm just here twiddling my thumbs. And I'm like, maybe they just needed budget. I don't know what's going on here. Oh, and by the way, I'm the only female there. So, oh, except for the little
Wow.
tech assistant or something, everybody else male. And which doesn't bother me. This was like basically college career and previous Boeing positions, right? But
Mhm.
this was different because this is also the defense side. And while the airplane is cool, like the job was not cool
Mm.
for me, for my
It
personality.
wasn't
So really,
fulfilling?
what was that?
It wasn't fulfilling?
It wasn't fulfilled. No, not when they don't give me anything and I'm not learning anything. I love to learn. I love to collaborate. Like that's not my personality, just to go in there and sit and wait. That's why I kept asking. And they're like, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah." And then they didn't give me anything. And I did this for almost a year. And, they would give me like pieces here and there. And like it was so awful. But I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave. I was looking for other jobs. I tried to go back to my other job. Um, but they were closed. Like they weren't hiring. There was a hiring freeze in interiors. Um, and it was very difficult because I want
You
purpose,
said you
right? This is
did or you didn't wanna leave?
I didn't want to leave because it gave, even though I wasn't doing anything, it gave me purpose, it gave me community, and I liked being at the company. And I
Gotcha.
was looking for other jobs while I was there. So like while I wanted to leave that position, if I left, I knew that I wouldn't have community, this purpose of going to work and doing something, even though I wasn't doing anything because they
Mhm.
weren't giving me anything. So this was really bothersome to me because the previous job, like they started giving me stuff like from the get-go, all previous jobs from the get-go. And even like the previous job, like the guy who was sitting next to me, he had two different hats on. And when I finished my work, they gave me his work. And so like
Oh,
I was just boom, boom, boom. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And my lead is like, he called me over once and he goes, "I have good news and bad news." And I go, "Uh-oh." He goes, "Everybody wants to work with you." Not everybody can work with me at the same time. That was the bad news. But it was good because like everybody thought highly of me, right? So anyway, but like my whole body was no. Anyway, so I was going to quit. So I went to my old manager and I said, "Hey, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to wait for you to open up a requisition. I need to leave this. This isn't serving me. It's not serving them. This is god awful for me. I'm very unhappy. And it's not like I could take another educational leave of absence and go get another graduate degree. I just wasn't interested at that time to go study somewhere. So
How
he
long
said,
were you in that position?
total a year and 3 months.
So a year and
A
three
year and three
months, you
months.
were in a place that you
Yeah,
didn't.
something like that. Yeah. But I ended up taking, so my previous manager said, take a leave of absence. So I took a 3 month leave of absence, but I didn't want to come back. So I extended it one more month. So I took a 4 month leave of absence and I still didn't want to come back. But then I was like, okay, I have to cut the tie. I have to go back to just leave, right? To get my stuff and close everything out and leave. Right when I was going back, my previous manager sent me a requisition because they were unfreezing the hiring. And so I applied for it. I got the interview, of course, ha ha ha. And then he got shipped off to a different organization. And then they closed it again, reorged. And I said, F all this, see you later. So, yes.
You
But
went to
this
do
is
your
like,
own
so
thing?
I saw, yes. And that's when I said, I'm leaving. That's it. And I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm like, I'm just going to be unemployed because I am so unhappy. And there was this deep darkness inside of me after that.
Mm.
Like it took a really long time to get over it. And I don't know if it was because I didn't listen to myself and I should have left earlier. I don't know if it was because I didn't feel like I had any purpose, even though like I was still volunteering and still seeing friends and going to work out. Like I just didn't have that, we grow up,
Unction?
seeing right? Like our parents are working, our friends are working, and then all of a sudden, like, you're not, right? Like, it's part of me. It's part of my personality to keep do something. And like,
Right.
I didn't feel good. And so I was in this depression,
So it was like
of,
everybody else was working around you, but here you are watching things happen. And that just didn't feel good to not be in the doing of things. Is that what I'm hearing?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So, yeah, and then we moved out here. So, I started to heal. I started to heal. And that was really nice for me. I was sitting in the sun. We moved here in March of 2015. I sat outside in the sun. I had no job prospects. I knew I wasn't going to. So something needed to change here. But
Hmm.
I was sitting outside and the sun felt so good. It was like 60 degrees. And I already started to heal. I started to feel the healing of my body, of my spirit. It just took
Is
a
there
really long time.
is there something that is in the sun that provides healing properties? Is that what you
Well,
mentioned?
Well, I mean, there is, vitamin D, and it just,
Mhm.
it's cheery and just being outside, like it feels good. And maybe it reminds you of your childhood and playing out in the summertime. But just, Seattle is gray, rainy, cold. And, I think just being able to sit out here and just receive. And I think that's really the biggest thing. It was receive. And
Mm.
when you're open to receiving, good things happen. If you keep saying no and closing the door, the universe hears you.
Mm. So, what does that look like for people that are trying to figure out, oh, is this the voice of the universe? How do I know that I'm saying no to the universe?
It's a really good question. So, one of the things that you can do is start testing yourself, start listening to yourself. And, you will when you just release the exhale, it allows your shoulders to drop and really be in this present moment. And when you're in this present moment, then you can really tune into yourself. And one way to start practicing is to just ask yourself, hey, do I feel like eating a banana or do I feel like eating an apple? Or
Mm.
give yourself a choice of like, what is it that I want to do? And start noticing what your body is telling you. Which
Mm.
the other way to do it is you can stand up. You can also do it like sitting down, but I think standing up is better. When you're standing up, notice what happens when you ask yourself a question, any question at all. Do I want to stay in this job? And then really pay attention. And you can like force yourself a little bit just to kind of instigate some movement in your body.
Hmm.
But when you're in this space, do I want to stay in this job? Notice it's going to be micro movements. Notice if you're leaning forward, leaning in like a yes, or are you like leaning out, leaning back a little bit,
Mm.
right? Do I
Other
want to
than
go to
the
this
micro,
micro movement? Just notice what, do I want to go to this party tonight? Mm,
mm.
start listening to this. And, really, when we're eating good foods, healthy foods, that helps us have like a clean body. That helps us
Okay, so we
to,
can be
right? If we have too much sugar and too much
more
stuff, like,
responsive?
yes, right? Like we might get distracted by other things. So those are a couple ways. Another way that you can check in with yourself is it's tested the time it tested one, right? Just flip a coin, right? Heads I want to do it, tails I don't, and then flip it and then see which one you're hoping it's for,
Hmm.
right?
Oh,
Right?
so it's not really the outcome of the coin, but it's the hope that you're,
Yeah,
"Hey."
of what the coin's going to tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
Before
And if you like to journal, you can just write, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? There's magical things that happen when you start journaling, when you write, even if you just keep writing the same question over and over again and just start seeing like what's coming up, because what comes out of here and what comes from here is going to be different than what comes from the hand.
talk about that. And we only have 15 minutes, by the way. Please talk
Only.
about that, 'cause I'm like, "Wait a minute, hold on, we got to let's get this nugget."
Yeah. So just start writing. If you have a question, whatever it is, if you're feeling something, just grab
Mhm.
a notebook and just start writing and see what happens. See what comes out of the pen of you writing. What does your truest, highest self really want to tell you? What do I
Mm,
need to know? The other thing I do is when I get a massage, I actually ask, like, my higher self or the universe or source or whoever it is,
mhm.
what do I need to know? Or if I have a specific question, but more often than not is, what do I need to know? And then I usually get some
A download or
message,
something? Okay,
yeah, during the massage. But you can
okay.
also do this before you go to sleep.
The
Before you go to
journaling
sleep,
or the
that
asking the
all of
question?
it. And you could do any
Okay,
of it, right? But you can ask yourself, like if you need to know next steps on something,
yeah,
what's my next step in this relationship, right?
yeah,
And this, just ask yourself and just leave it go, because you're in a state of almost falling asleep. That's a higher state of awareness. And then when you wake up, you will usually come up with an answer. Or sometime when you're not doing, like if you are, when you're taking a shower, we usually get an answer, right?
mm.
When you're walking outside in nature, you'll get an answer. I always get great ideas
I
on my
I haven't
walks.
gotten those. I've heard that about the shower, I haven't gotten that yet, but writing, I have. It for me, it's been so powerful.
Well, maybe
Especially
now you'll get some messages when you take your shower because you're putting it out there.
there's something that you taught me about the, ask, acknowledge, and accept.
Hmm.
So I'd like for you to share with our audience before we go what that is, and then, yeah, what that practice is and how it could be applicable for them. And yeah, I think that'd be a good note to end off with, because I've been sharing that ever since you taught me that.
Wait. Do you mean the 90 seconds or?
You told me to ask myself how I'm feeling, acknowledge it, and then accept it. Like when you were telling me those words, like the release. Maybe it is the 90 seconds.
I think it was the 90 seconds. I'm like,
Maybe.
oh my gosh, did I
Okay,
say that? I don't remember saying that. But maybe it was like divine guidance coming out of my mouth and helping you out there. Maybe that's how you understood it, right?
that's probably is how I understood it, because that's how I've been
Yes.
teaching it.
Well, you know what? If that's how it works, that's awesome. No, totally. I think that's perfect. It's brilliant. I tell people for these 90 seconds, use words that feel good to
Mhm.
you.
Okay.
Use words that feel good to you. So what I learned was, um, you can do this sitting down. I do it right before, like right when I wake up, right before I even open my eyes. I I'm just laying there and I'm like open to receiving, so I know I'm on my back.
Hmm.
And for about 90 seconds, I'm not counting the 90 seconds, but I just keep repeating it. And so I inhale ease, exhale surrender, feeling my body melt. And then I pause in joy. So, like, I've tweaked it since we last spoke. And it could be abundance, it could be surrender, it could be ease, it could be joy, it could be spaciousness. My friend does spaciousness, and I love that. So what words come to you that help you to bring in what you need? Maybe it's love. When we are in this space of love, ease, surrender, abundance, our vibration is higher. When our vibration is higher, we attract more, right? Joy, surrender, we are present. So inhaling ease, exhaling surrender, and then pause for joy. Inhale ease, exhale surrender, pause for joy. Just keep repeating it. Ease, surrender, and joy. And I do this throughout the day. Anytime I feel like I'm tense or stressed out, I just get back into the space. So 90 seconds is how long it takes for us to go through to have an emotion. That's what studies suggest. Yeah. And I can't remember who did the study, but I think it was a Harvard person.
I read that in the Emotion Code by Dr. Bradley Nelson.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So 90 seconds. And usually we only acknowledge that because we're in grief, we're sad, we're angry. We don't acknowledge it for anything positive. It's just more negative connotation. And when we're in that, maybe it doesn't feel like 90 seconds because we stay in it and we stew and it just keeps repeating. So really being aware and present to, oh my God, I'm feeling angry or whatever it is. And knowing that letting this emotion pass through is the healthiest thing to do. Don't shut it down, right? Because it'll just explode later on. So just like feel the anger, whatever it is, yell, take a pillow and swish it, hit it against the bed or something. I don't know, but let it go. So what was that?
So it just needs its expression, whatever that is.
It just needs to be expressed, whatever it is. But going back and just taking this 90 seconds for beauty, right? To just take us out of that fight or flight mode. It's so beautiful. And so ever since I learned this, I've been doing it several times throughout the day, making it more of a habit so that my shoulders are down and not like this. Right? Because fight or flight.
After that.
Fight or flight is like, there's always a low level of stress. We always have some kind of low level of stress. We barely feel it. But then it keeps compiling, like it gets more and more as life and daily things happen. We get stressed out. And fight or flight is what it does is it creates more stress in our body. When we're stressed out, our immune system gets shot, and then we cause disease. So there's more inflammation, and then we get sick. So it's this vicious cycle of how then we can't attract anything when we're sick.
We just we're attracting the contrast. We're attracting toxicity.
We're attracting toxicity. Yeah. So if we can bring in this surrender, this ease, this love, this abundance, this spaciousness, and creating space for good, then we'll be able to attract more. Because then we're lighter. You feel lighter. Like when you're angry and upset, like you're just like, that doesn't feel good at all, right? So, when we're at ease, right, you'll be able to attract more, the abundance that you want.
Thank you. So, my dear, we are ending the podcast for Fran and Friends, but I would love for people to know where to find you. Your social media links, and if you could leave us before you let people know where to find you, what's one thing that has guided your life that was so key, or you could share 3 things that you think people could use for their own guidance? And you shared so many of them today, but
I know. I think it's really important to know who you are. Know who you are and really stop doing things like habitually. Like I remember you saying a lot like, oh my God, I hate Seattle. Oh my God, all the gray. But at some level, like when you stop yourself and start noticing like what you're saying on repeat, In Sanskrit, it's called samskara. It is a habit. We become so habitualized to things that we don't even notice when it's happening. But if you can be in the present moment and really hear what you are saying, because what you say will happen. Thoughts become things. Words, emotions become thoughts. They become things. So be mindful of what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're doing, because that's what you will create. So really being with yourself and being present and really understanding and listening to what you are saying. Because if you don't like what you are saying, then you need to change that so that you can be more authentic.
Because what I think I heard is like we're basically fortune telling and we're scripting those things or spelling
Yeah.
those things out for
Yes.
ourselves, regardless of whether we really want that or not.
Yeah.
The universe, from my understanding, doesn't know the difference between what you really want and what you're saying is what and
Yes.
so
No,
that
that's
they'll
you.
go along with the narrative.
Yes. And you bring up a good point, Fran. The universe hears what we're saying, but so that's why we always have to put things in the positive, because it may not hear what we really mean. Right. I don't want to go there really means like you want to go there, because the universe doesn't hear the don't. They hear you want to go there. So keeping things positive of what you really want. Yeah. I mean, you can play around with it. It's kind of magical if you're paying attention. If you're paying attention.
Well, universe, I want more moments of abundance.
Yeah.
More moments like these, goodness and
Yep.
juiciness.
Yep.
Well, please let everybody know where you are on your social media handles, and also to let them know how you can help them.
Great. Yeah. So my website is monica.coach, monica.coach. On there, there's a link to join my Facebook group, and that is Happy and Healthy. It's my Facebook group, One Step Closer to Happy and Healthy. And there I give some tips and stuff. You can also sign up for my newsletter, which you can sign up on my website. Everything can be found on my website. Yeah. And I specialize in Ayurveda. I'm a coach. I'm a health transformation coach. I specialize in Ayurveda, so creating the space for who you are. And what Ayurveda is, it's the sister science to yoga, and it tells me who you are. There's we have three different body constitutions, mind constitutions, and I can help you with that. So to help you get in alignment with your path.
All right. Well, thank you so much for helping everybody that is online listening to our message, whether it's now or in the future. I really appreciate the energy that you brought here and for sharing your story, because we just never know where these conversations end up being. And so the universe really knows how to be strategic.
Yes, it does, when we're paying attention.
All right, Monica, thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to connecting with you at another time.
Thank you, Fran.
All right, you're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Later.